Part 1.
A student wants to register for a conference. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can I help you?
Yes. Is this where we register for the Beyond 2000 conference?
Yes. What's your name and I'll get your conference bag.
Well, I haven't actually registered yet. I was told I'd be able to register today, so I hope that's okay. I've just arrived in Melbourne.
That should be fine if you're a student. I'll need to take your details though. So, can I have your full name?
Yes, sure. It's Melanie Mitchell.
Is that M-I-T-C-H-E-L-L?
Yes, that's right. And that's Ms., not Miss.
OK, fair enough. And what's your address, Melanie?
I live in student accommodation at Sydney University, so my address there is Room 66, Women's College, Newtown.
OK. And which faculty are you studying in?
I'm in the Faculty of Education. I'm doing a Master's in Primary School teaching.
Right. And may I see your student card because I need to verify that you're a current student?
Yes, sure. Here it is. My number is 994578ED.
The woman asks the student some more questions about the conference. Look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen to their conversation and answer questions 5 to 10.
OK. Now, do you want to attend all 3 days? The conference runs from Thursday to Saturday.
Yes, I think so, if I can afford it. What does it cost?
Well, you're eligible for a student discount, which makes it $15 for a day registration or $40 for the 3 days, though it is possible to register for half a day only.
I'll register for all 3 days, please.
Good. Now, will you be requiring accommodation while you're here in Melbourne?
Yes, I suppose I will. What's available?
Well, we have several levels of accommodation. You can share a room with another student for $25 a night. Or you can have your own room but share the bathroom. I believe it's just down the corridor. That's $45.
Right.
Or you can have a single room with your own bathroom.
I don't mind sharing a room. On second thoughts, yes, I do. I'll have my own room, but I'll share the bathroom.
Right. Now, the conference fee does not include meals, though you do get tea and coffee in the breaks. Shall I put you down for lunch? That's an extra $10 a day. And there's the conference dinner on Friday night, which is $25. Oh, and what about breakfast?
Hang on a minute. It's all starting to sound rather expensive. I'll have the lunch, but not the dinner or breakfast, if that's okay.
Perfectly okay. Now, a couple of other things. There are a number of special interest groups organised. They're known as SIGs, and you're asked to nominate your preference. They'll take place on the Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, but they're filling up quickly, which is why you need to nominate now.
Right. What are the SIGs?
Well, there are 6 altogether. Let's see. On Friday, you have a choice between computers in education or teaching reading skills. Or a session on catering for the gifted child.
Oh, they all sound interesting. But technology in the classroom is really my area of interest, rather than reading. So I'll go for that. I can probably read up on the gifted child topic myself.
Right. And then the Saturday options are a session on cultural differences, or there's music in the primary curriculum, or you could go to the one on gender issues in the classroom.
Wow! Can I go to them all? They all sound fascinating.
Afraid not.
Well, I'm really interested in how boys and girls behave differently, even when they are very young, so I'd better opt for the third session, even though the cultural differences sig is probably really interesting too.
Right.
And the music option would be interesting.
And how would you like to pay? We accept most credit cards or bank cheques, but not personal cheques, I'm afraid. Been caught out too often before. And cash, of course. We never say no to cash.
I'll have to put it on my card because I don't have enough cash on me right now.
That's fine. Enjoy your time here with us in Melbourne.
That is the end of part 1. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 2.
You will hear a representative of a city council giving information about 2 new facilities which are opening soon in the city. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to say a little about 2 exciting new developments in the city: the Brackenside open-air swimming pool and the Children's Adventure Playground in Central Park. As many of you may know, the idea for these initiatives came from you, the public, in the extensive consultation exercise which the City Council conducted last year, and they have been realised using money from the SWRDC, the South West Regional Development Commission. First of all, Brackenside Pool. As many of the older members of the audience will remember, there used to be a wonderful open-air pool on the seafront 30 years ago, but it had to close when it was judged to be unsafe. For the design of this new heated pool, we were very happy to secure the talents of internationally renowned architect Ellen Wendon, who has managed to combine a charming 1930s design, which fits in so well with many of the other buildings in the area, with up-to-the-minute features such as a recycling system, the only one of its kind in the world, which enables seawater to be used in the pool. Now, there's been quite a bit of discussion in the local press about whether there would be enough room for the number of visitors we're hoping to attract, but the design is deceptive, and there have been rigorous checks about capacity. Also, just in case you were wondering, we're on schedule for a June the 15th opening date, and well within budget, a testimony to the excellent work of local contractors Hickman's. We hope that as many people as possible will be there on June the 15th. We have engaged award-winning actress Coral White to declare the pool open, and there'll be drinks and snacks available at the poolside. There'll also be a competition for the public to decide on the sculpture we plan to have at the entrance. You will decide which famous historical figure from the city we should have.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
And now, moving on to the Central Park Playground, which we're pleased to announce has just won the Douglas Award for Safety. The news came through only last week. The unique design is based on the concept of the global village, with the playground being divided into 6 areas showing different parts of the world, each with a representative feature. For example, there is a section on Asia, and this is represented by rides and equipment in the shape of snakes, orangutans, tigers and so on, fauna native to the forests of the region. Moving south to the Antarctic, we couldn't run to an ice rink, I'm afraid, but opted instead for climbing blocks in the shape of mountains. I thought they could have had slides for the glaciers, but the designers did want to avoid being too literal. Then on to South America, and here the theme is El Dorado, games replicating the search for mines full of precious stones. And then, moving up to North America, here there was considerable debate. I know the contribution of cinema and jazz was considered, but the designers finally opted for rockets and the International Space Station. Eastwards to Europe then, and perhaps the most traditional choice of all the areas, medieval castles and other fortifications. Then last but not least, moving south to Africa, and a whole set of wonderful mosaics and trails to represent the great rivers of this fascinating and varied continent. Now, the opening date for our global playground is the 10th of July, and again, we'd love to see you there. So, make a date and come and see this magnificent, original new amenity right in the heart of the city.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 3.
You will hear a scientific discussion about how people experience pain. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. As you listen to the first part of the discussion, answer questions 21 to 25.
Scientists at University College London have made a discovery which makes mice pain-free and have reversed painlessness in a woman with a rare condition. I'm joined by Dr. Natasha Curran, consultant in anaesthesia and pain medicine at University College London Hospitals, and by Professor John Wood, lead author of the study and a neuroscientist at UCL. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Natasha, perhaps we can start with perhaps a rather basic question, which is, why do we experience pain at all? What's its purpose?
Pain is highly preserved in humans because we need pain to prevent us further damaging ourselves. However, what we know in many people is that pain continues past when it's useful for us.
And we're all familiar with the idea of sort of feeling pain, but what is happening inside one's body? So when I stub my toe and I scream and shout, what's actually happening inside my body from that moment?
Well, receptors in your toe are getting stimulated and they send messages down your nerves which end up in your brain. And in your brain, various things happen. In one part of your brain, which is the somatosensory cortex, that's the part of the brain that says it's your toe that's feeling the pain or the injury rather than your hand or your head. So that's one part, but then it's much more complex than that because pain is an emotional experience. So it's connected then to all the other parts of the brain, which they give us our experience of pain, if you like. So that depends on the context in which we're having pain, our past experience, what we think the pain means, lots of factors. And then also it connects to what we think we're going to do about the pain. So parts of the brain light up, if you like, how we're going to respond to the pain that we're experiencing.
How big a problem is pain, and how big a burden is this for people to be dealing with?
In the UK, it's massive. In 2011, the National Pain Audit reported that 31% of men and 37% of women live with persistent pain. So that's 40 million people. their quality of life is very, very poor, much lower than other medical conditions. It's as bad as people who have, for example, Parkinson's disease. One of the reasons it's really important to understand this is because we know that we can actually help these people if they attend specialist pain management services. We can improve their quality of life. And specialist pain management services have doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, psychologists, and potentially occupational therapists, psychiatrists, in order to help them.
John, how thorough is our understanding of pain? Is, for example, chronic pain different to the pain we feel when we knock our knee or have a headache?
Well, there are clearly enormous mechanistic differences, and it's very striking how mechanisms to experience pain are conserved across evolution. And pain is really an essential survival mechanism. So the mechanisms that occur in people are quite similar to those that occur in mice, for example. And so we can make comparisons between animal models and the human experience. But we really know very little at all about how pain is experienced centrally. There are various parts of the brain that have been correlated with the experience of pain, but this is very, very weakly done. In fact, it's to define a precise locus in the brain where pain is perceived has proved completely elusive. So the way we feel pain and the intensity of pain is regulated by all kinds of things like circadian rhythms, emotional state, and we don't have many insights into how this actually works.
Why is consciousness linked so much with pain and pain with consciousness?
Well, there's a wonderful book by Philip K. Dick, the person who wrote so many perceptive science fiction novels, and he says that pain and beauty are the two underlying themes of human nature. In fact, trying to understand where the brain perceives beauty is just as difficult as trying to understand where the pain is perceived in the brain. Consciousness obviously is required for any kind of sensation. Pain is just one of those types of sensations that we're aware of when we're alive and awake.
Well, as an anaesthetist, that's part of our main role. Surgery can't go ahead unless we have anaesthesia, because obviously in the modern world and in most parts of the world we want to be able to anaesthetise so that people don't experience the pain of surgery. And we know that there are some states of consciousness where people can undergo quite stimulating and unpleasant to most people experiences such as surgery, but for most people they need to be unconscious, so in a state of anaesthesia.
Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
It sounds like we have some clues as to how pain works, although there's a lot that we don't know. Is that why it's so difficult to find ways to block it, because we don't really understand the mechanisms particularly well? I
think what we do understand is the kind of area that Natasha works in, which is the sensation of tissue damage by specialised nerves in the skin and the muscle and the viscera, and how those nerves are activated and send electrical signals. So the activity of those nerves is absolutely required for most pain states. And so by focusing on them, we can actually find ways to treat pain without understanding anything about pain perception. And so that's the focus of interest of most pain scientists. And that's where anaesthetists also are working in terms of blocking the drive into the central nervous system. But pain perception itself is completely mysterious.
A good example of this might be one I explain to my patients, which is a phantom limb pain. Listeners might have heard of this already. It's when people can have a painful limb once they've had an amputation. So a person may have had to have an amputation for a medical reason, such as the leg in this case, let's say, might become gangrenous. So that's done under anaesthesia as a surgical procedure. But after the operation and the wound's healed, then people who are unfortunate enough to get this phenomenon can then experience sensations in that leg which has been removed, and not just sensations, that if they've had pain there before, they can often experience pain. So even though the leg's not there, it's no longer physically present, the patient still feels that their leg's there and it can be painful. And of course that's very distressing, and it also gives us the notion that pain is not just in the nerves, the peripheral nerves, the ones in the leg. It's modulated in the brain.
Yeah, if I can come in there.
Yes,
pain has nothing to do with the peripheral nerves. Pain is in the brain. But there's a requirement for nervous input from the periphery in order to feel pain. In almost all states. There are situations where you can get pain after a stroke because you have lesions in your thalamus, and that's obviously some form of central pain syndrome. But almost all inflammatory pain states like rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis or diabetic neuropathy, all these chronic pain states require the activity of peripheral nerves, and that's what we try to block without understanding the perception of the painful stimulus itself.
So, Natasha, it's an interesting point that John was saying about us needing stimulation of our nerves sort of throughout our body, our peripheral nerves. So what's happening in the case of phantom limb?
Well, there's several theories, and there's probably not one overarching thing that's happening. We know that pain can create a memory of itself, just like any other experience that people have. You might have, heard some records on the radio recently about David Bowie, for example, and that takes you, listening to that record takes you back to a certain point. So listening to music can take you to a certain point in time. And some sort of stimulation, for example, movement in that limb or something else, which is the peripheral, like John's talking about, that peripheral input, can cause a learnt sensation to be re-experienced. It's not that the person's actively trying to recall that painful experience. Who would want that? But so it's like anything that's learnt. The nervous system's really, really good at learning things. That's how we've learnt to do all the, the great things that humans and people do in their lives. Unfortunately, it's almost like it can get switched on for some sensations, and then the person continues to feel that pain, even though there's no obvious mechanistic reason for them to continue to feel it.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about noise in cities. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
This lecture will be about the science of acoustics, the study of sound, in relation to urban environments such as cities. As an acoustic engineer myself, I think this is an area where we're likely to see great changes. In the past, researching urban soundscapes was simple. We measured levels of sound in decibels, so I used to take my sound meter and I measured the noise somewhere, and then I might ask a sample of people to say at what level the sound became annoying. With data like this, acoustic engineers have been able to build up what we call noise maps, maps of the sound environment. But actually, these aren't a lot of use. What they do show is that the highest noise levels are generally on roads. Well, that's not really very surprising. But there's quite a lot going on that these maps don't show, because they can't capture the complex way that sound varies over time. So they ignore important issues such as the noise someone might hear from the open windows or gardens of their neighbours. And this sort of noise can be quite significant in summer. We don't have any databases on this sort of information. As well as that, these records of sound levels take no account of the fact that people vary in their perceptions of noise. So someone like me with years of working in acoustics might be very different from you in that regard. But anyway, even though these noise maps are fairly crude, they've been useful in providing information and raising awareness that noise matters. We need to deal with it, and so it's a political matter. And that's important. We need rules and regulations because noise can cause all sorts of problems. Those of you who are city dwellers know that things go on 24 hours a day, so city dwellers often suffer from interrupted sleep. It's also known that noise can lead to a rise in levels of stress due to physical changes in the body affecting the composition of the blood. And there are other problems as well. For instance, if school children don't have a quiet place to study, their work will suffer. Now, one problem with decibel measurement is that it doesn't differentiate between different types of noise. Some types of sounds that most people would probably think of as nice and relaxing might well score quite highly in decibel levels. Think of the sound made by a fountain in a town square, for example. That's not necessarily something that we'd want to control or reduce. So maybe researchers should consider these sorts of sounds in urban design. This is going to be tricky, because just measuring decibel levels isn't going to help us here. Instead, many researchers are using social science techniques, studying people's emotional response to sound by using questionnaires and so on. So what exactly do people want to hear in an urban environment? Some recent interdisciplinary research has come out with results that at first sight seem contradictory. A city needs to have a sense of activity, so it needs to be lively, with sounds like the clack of high heels on a pavement or the hiss of a coffee machine. But these mustn't be too intrusive, because at the same time we need to be able to relax. One of the major problems in achieving this will be getting architects and town planners to use the research. Apart from studying the basics of acoustics, these people receive very little training in this area. But in fact, they should be regarding sound as an opportunity to add to the experience of urban living, whereas at present they tend to see it as something to be avoided or reduced as far as possible, or something that's just a job for engineers, like the street drainage system. What's needed is for noise in cities to be regarded as an aesthetic quality, as something that has the qualities of an art form. If we acknowledge this, then we urgently need to know what governs it and how designers can work with it. We need to develop a complex understanding of many factors. What is the relationship between sound and culture? What can we learn from disciplines such as psychology about the way that sound interacts with human development and social relationships, and the way that sound affects our thoughts and feelings? Can we learn anything from physics about the nature of sound itself? Today's powerful technologies can also help us. To show us their ideas and help us to imagine the effect their buildings will have, architects and town planners already use virtual reality, but these programs are silent. In the future, such programs could use realistic sounds, meaning that soundscapes could be explored before being built. So hopefully, using the best technology we can lay our hands on, the city of the future will be a pleasure to the ears as well as the eyes.
That is the end of part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.